The Collab365 Summit. My name is Andy Tolbert. I'm broadcasting live from Microsoft HQ in Redmond. We have a very special session today, which I think is extremely relevant, whether you're in the contract market or the permanent market. We're going to be talking about candidate trends and the recruitment market. And in order to assist us on this session, we're joined by some very special experts in this field, a company called Nigel Frank. And I'm going to introduce two guys that represent Nigel Frank today, live from New York. Guys, would you like to come into the show?
How you doing, Andy? Thank you very much for having us, everyone. So just to introduce myself, my name is Alec Porter. I'm the team leader for the SharePoint Contracts Division for North America. Previously based in our London office, and did the same role in the UK.
My name is Paden Simmons, one of the business managers here at our New York office. Run the permanent teams for Office 365, Skype for Business, Azure, SharePoint, and Business Intelligence for North America.
And what time is it where you are right now in New York?
Just shy of 6 p.m.
Oh, fantastic. I think we're coming to about 3 o'clock, so nearly time to go for a well-earned beverage. Okay, gentlemen, right, we're going to be having a discussion today about the contract and permanent markets, aren't we, across the US and the United Kingdom. If I'm right in thinking, Nigel Frank has quite a large representation in these two markets especially.
Certainly. Yeah, that's right. So, I mean, just across North America, we've got shy of about 200 recruitment consultants purely focusing on Microsoft recruitment across North America. Just shy of about, just over 700 people now globally. So we've got offices out of the UK that focuses all across EMEA, out of Singapore, which focuses on our APAC region, as well as Melbourne, that focuses on the same region there as well. And then our West Coast San Francisco office and our New York offices as well. So we have a global reach, global organization, like I say, purely focusing on recruitment on the Microsoft space.
And how long have you guys been in that market space?
So I've been in it for nearly 3 years now. Paden, I think you're for about 5.
Coming up on actually 5 years come Monday. I started actually in the Dynamics space, Microsoft Dynamics, and then the past 3.5 years moved over into what we classify as the stack. So those products that I mentioned previously for all of the United States and Canada.
That's fantastic. So you guys are well qualified to speak in this session. So my understanding is we should be delving into trends, changes, and the latest requirements in the SharePoint recruitment market.
Yeah, that's right. So what we wanted to talk about was what has been happening. We speak with anywhere from 50 to 100 people every single day, candidates and clients, about hiring and jobs. So what we've done a huge amount of work in the communities, personally within the SharePoint user groups and the SharePoint communities in Dallas, across the US. And we wanted to try and use this session to give back, to try and educate people on the market as to, because Microsoft is changing, because these new technologies are coming out, the recruitment market is changing. So you as a candidate, as an individual, need to be aware of these types of things. And also not just with that as well, what we want to focus on specifically about today is the clients that are watching. People that do hire people that find it very, very difficult to find skilled people. There's less than 1% unemployment rate for anybody that works in these particular types of technologies. So it's exceptionally difficult to find people. What we want to try and do is give people advice and guidance on how to find people, how to retain those people when you've got them, and also how to work with recruiters, be it internal or whether it being external, in order to find the new caliber of people that are coming through with the changes that Microsoft are bringing in.
And that's a really valid point there. The landscape has changed. I mean, personally speaking, I've been in the SharePoint market for over 10 years now, and I've had to adapt. If I didn't, I wouldn't be employable right now. But I'm not the only person that would have noticed this and felt like that. You guys would have noticed that quite a bit. So let's step back in history. Can you tell us a little bit about how the market used to be from an employer and an employee and employer space, please?
Yeah, sure. I mean, what we found is that the majority of the roles, specifically in the SharePoint space, could be categorized into a couple of key categories. It would be, admin and development. It would be architecture. Then it would maybe be more the functional side, business analysts and project managers. And it would almost be those kind of 5 key categories. People that have downloaded the document, the PDF file that we've attached, there's appendixes in there that split them specifically into those categories. Because although we don't have a set trend directly from Microsoft as to what each role does or what specific things do, and therefore the job titles have changed. So traditionally they've been kind of categorized into those 5 key brackets, but realistically when you dive into them, they're completely separate and individual. SharePoint developer now could probably be categorized as 4 different types of SharePoint developer. So traditionally that's been what people have focused on, and that's what you'll find on the job boards, and that's what you'll find from adverts, those particular titles.
Yeah, no, certainly, and that's across the board, not just within SharePoint, but across the majority of the other products that this summit is surrounding. In particular, your newer technologies that are more emerging technologies around Azure and Office 365, is that there's just so many different ways now to describe different functions within a role, within different features, out of the box custom development, you name it. Everybody has a different title, a different way to describe what they want to get done.
And have you noticed quite a difference between what job titles used to be? Like we said, there was generic developer, there was generic architect, generic IT pro, I guess. Has that changed to the current day at the moment?
I certainly think those are still being used. There's just a lot more detail in what goes into each type. If you take Microsoft Azure, for instance, from an architect perspective, you're looking at infrastructure architect and a platform architect are 2 very, very different things, but they may be titled an Azure architect. So it really just gets down to the nuts and the bolts of what's required in the role. And as I mentioned, that's along those emerging technologies, and certainly the same for SharePoint, I believe, as well.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's a really good point that Paden makes. It's about getting into the nuts and bolts of what the role actually entails, and that's something that we find when we speak with clients. Especially if you have an internal recruitment team, a HR department that will naturally recruit for any role, whether that is an admin, finance assistant, right the way through to an Azure cloud platform architect, for example, and people's processes are very, very similar. What we actually need to, when we try and educate people on this, is that the processes need to be very, very different. We need to understand, people need to understand, recruiters, whether being internal or external, need to understand what the nuts and bolts of that role entails, because that's how those adverts are going to get written. How many times have you ever seen a terribly written advert from a recruiter? Part of it is because they don't understand, we are the least technical people that will be involved in these conferences. We don't really know of what these particular roles or these jobs actually do, what the technologies are like. So we need to understand the nuts and bolts of it. And that's where you can get that differentiation between what the job actually entails compared to what the actual job title is. It doesn't necessarily always matter about the job titles, especially in contracts as well. The contracts market, which is my area of expertise, the job title can be anything, all right? Whereas in the permanent market, it can be a title be a very desirable thing to have a specific title, especially in certain cultures around the world as well. Certainly something to factor in.
So what happens if you have clients coming to you with what you might deem a rather ambiguous job title? Do you try and guide them to align to something that's maybe more meaningful to the candidates in the marketplace?
Certainly on the permanent side, there's a bit more flexibility into what an individual can bring to the table and what we can kind of wiggle around in a job description, I guess, because there's more, you're not just coming in to do a specific project or task. You would be doing something over the course of time, hopefully. And that really comes from the conversations that we aim to have with the hiring managers, with the VPs, with the individuals that are making the decision, is to walk through that, one, starting with the job description, but then truly understanding what it is, what function will this individual play in the first 6 months? What function will they play in that 12-month period, in that 18-month period, to get the roadmap for the role? Mm-hmm. And then certainly educate them on what is available in the market. Looking for somebody, how many times we have somebody come to us and say, I'd like somebody that's at an architect level, that's got 4+ years, 5+ years experience, not only with Azure, but Office 365, SharePoint, and can also do Power BI, Power BI implementation. And that skill set just doesn't exist. And if it does, it's somebody that's walking on water, essentially. So there very much is an education process, and the kind of not validating, but ranking the the essentials and then the nice to have within the role. And our job is to meet those criteria as best as we can. But there's no perfect candidate for a perfect job. That doesn't exist in the recruitment market. So it's about finding what works best for the client and what works best for the candidate, and then finding that common ground between the two.
So guys, you mentioned earlier on that the landscape is changing to this current day because of, I'm going to say, disruptive technologies to on-premises. And what I mean by that is things like Office 365 and Azure, if we're talking specifically about the Microsoft stack. How have you found that that's changed the landscape in terms of employment opportunities? And I just want to kind of discuss this before we talk about what companies can do to help retain those individuals when they are in place.
Yeah. So what we're finding now is there is starting to be this shift. I mean, the best example that I've found of it and talking about it is if we were to take the SharePoint developer, the traditional SharePoint developer, if you'd like to call it, whose skill set is heavily flooded with coding and customization and C# and .NET and SQL, working very much on the back end. That skill set now is changing. I think that must have been at least 8 to 12 months since a client specifically requested that for me. And considering that all I do every single day is work on SharePoint roles, that's a big change that I've seen. What we're seeing now is very much this move to the client-side object model, JavaScript, HTML, CSS, these different kind of skill sets and technologies that clients are now looking for. A lot of businesses out there, a lot of end clients are now looking to utilize the product itself, SharePoint, Office 365, out of the box as much as possible. And if there is going to be any coding, it's a lot more on that client side. So that's one of the biggest changes that we're starting to see now. Along with that, if people have a look at Appendix 1, you'll start to see the percentage split of roles and requests that we're getting these days. And that's split within the Microsoft stack. So we have the SharePoint, Office 365, Azure as well as a couple of examples. SharePoint still dominates that, but we're now starting to see Office 365, Azure requirements coming in alongside that. So if you're a candidate watching thinking, oh, I'm not too sure where I want to go next, that might give you a little bit of an indication as to where where the market might be going to, where your competition might be lying as well.
Yeah. And I think that, and sorry to cut you off there, Andy, but certainly on the permanent side, as we're starting to see, certainly the consumption of Azure grow within the Microsoft space. It started 2 years ago, 3 years ago, as people were purchasing it, or it was there, but the consumption of it wasn't much at all. Now if you look at any job description or take any type of job spec with a partner or a new implementation with an end user, say on the SharePoint side or the business intelligence and SQL side, there's always a portion of that now that looking desirable experience within Azure. Yeah, it's in 98% of the job descriptions that are put out there now. So it's certainly the push on these technologies is certainly creating a lot of excitement, within the space, and giving candidates certainly great opportunities to develop new skills within the space as well.
Do you find with these new opportunities in Azure as well, there's a difference in salary expectation for contract and permanent when compared to SharePoint?
There's certainly a premium put on Azure and Office 365 at this point in time, and that's sheerly because there's limited options of people who know how to do it. It's only been around for so long, and people haven't had the opportunity to get their hands on it and actually do, a full life cycle implementation or enterprise-wide implementation with the product. So just based on the sheer selection pool is certainly driving up the salaries and the rates.
Yeah, definitely agree with that as well. It's typical, supply and demand, right? So at the moment, the supply for Azure and Office 365 at the moment is still fairly small because they're still fairly new technologies. Not a huge amount of people have amount of depth and experience. You said yourself that you've been in SharePoint for 10 years. How many people do you personally know that have been in SharePoint for more than 10 years? There's a huge number of people. Whereas on these other technologies, there's not as much there yet, and therefore when the demand then comes, those people that do have the experience know that they're in a premium and then can command those higher salaries and those higher rates. I believe what we're going to be looking to do is send out a salary survey that we conduct, which has taken over thousands and thousands of pieces of data over the last few years. and we post that. We'll be looking to post this through the Collab conference, where people can take a look at, and that's US, UK as well, for people to take a look at.
Yeah.
And that's something that you do annually as well, I believe, because I'm pretty sure I've received that quite a number of times.
Yeah, we do. Yeah, so that's basically there, and actually the appendixes that we've got, especially 1 to 4, are taken specifically from that salary survey. So they're actually within that salary survey that our marketing team have conducted over the years, and it's there for candidates to be able to use, and it's there for clients to be able to use as well.
So I guess when it comes to hiring, like you're saying, really good caliber candidates, especially in an area where it is challenging to get those people who do truly understand Azure and Office 365, there's two kind of challenges you're faced with here, aren't you? And I think the first one is attraction, and the second one is retention of those people. So if I was coming to you guys looking to find new talent in the Office 365 and Azure space, what kind of methods could I use to attract those true professionals in the first place?
Yeah, and I think that you have to start with the way that you're projecting your business. Whether, and if you take it down to the recruitment aspect of it, whether you're working with an external agency or your internal recruiters, they have to be the extension. They have to be another arm of what your business is, and that being communicated, time and time again the same way. But the best way that you can compare it is that if you're looking for premium talent, top tier talent within the marketplace, that resume is going to be in front of 9 other employers and 9 other hiring managers that are desperate and in need for this talent as well. So it comes down to how, what is setting your business apart from those other 9. And if you look at Appendix 3, it breaks down kind of what the top benefits are within the business. And you can look through those, and there's anything from bonus to the insurance plans that are provided, the work from home flexibility, and that certainly will go into retention side of things, which myself and Alex will comment on as well. But it's about how you sell the opportunity within the marketplace, and that comes down to what's offered, one, from a compensation package, but what we found is that compensation is not even close to everything that the people are looking for. What they're looking for is the excitement around the project, what the perceived growth plan is within the business, what type of impact they can have on a project. And the way that you can get that out there is by having good quality conversations with your internal, your external recruiters, and making sure that they're explaining that to candidates and they can answer questions on behalf of the business, and come across as, that they understand what they are talking about, they understand what the opportunity is, and how to explain that and sell that. Because at the end of the day, you're going up against, you could have the best opportunity in the world, but it's about how it's explained and how well that candidate understands that.
I think that's such a good point. The hiring managers out there are not the ones that are initially speaking with the clients. I mean, even with clients that I have the best relationships with, I say to them when it comes to an interview, look, you're the best people at selling your company, at selling your project to this individual, and that's interview stage. I've already got that person to that interview stage. But before that, there's countless conversations that recruiters or the internal people are having with these candidates that need to convince them enough to at least put their resume forward or to have an initial screening conversation. So they need to make sure basic key things where they're selling that organization in a way that wants to be sold, so that people don't get confused or they come off, how many times do people have a phone conversation and go, that's not for me, that's definitely the wrong thing that we're going to be looking for. And there needs to be that communication where there's a good, clear understanding as to what the business is about, what projects are going to be worked on, what's going to be happening in the future, how can this person benefit long term. I think if you stick to a couple of really key core skills and core points, it can keep it very, very simple. On the contracting side of things, Andy, I'm sure you can help me out with this one. Contractors not needing as much in-depth understanding of a business. What do you look for? I imagine it is going to be project, length of contract, rate, how much work you can do from home. Is there anything else that you're interested in about a business?
Yeah, you know what, and it's a really good question because we've known each other for a number of years and had this conversation a number of times. So you're right, from a contract perspective, I'm not really too fussed about career progression within the client that I'm working with. I'm not too fussed about training opportunities because that's my own responsibility to take care of. The things that I do ask about is the culture of the working place. I think you need to be able to enjoy your job. So I think that's something that's true regardless of whether you're contract or permanent. And also if there's going to be some kind of stability, because we all know that sometimes a contract, you can be in it and all of a sudden there's a financial problem. The business changes dramatically, maybe a new CEO comes in and all of a sudden you find yourself kind of walking out with your cardboard box a few months before you were supposed to finish. So I look for a bit of reassurance that the duration that's on paper, I really feel that that's going to exist.
Yeah, and that's something that is a very key point as well, because you want to make sure that job security is something that's commented about contract, and it's negatively frowned upon. But at the end of the day, you don't want to keep interviewing every 3 or 4 weeks. Go work on a project and all of a sudden they ship you off. So it's good to be able to know that and have that interaction. And again, that's what we're trying to go back to the point that we're saying when we're speaking with the internal recruiters or you're working with external recruiters. Be open and honest with them as to how long this contract is going to be. They should be open and honest with the candidates as well. Because if you specialize in something like Paden and I, we specialize in particular technologies and markets, and our theory has always been if you specialize in something, it's in your interest to deliver on that as best as you possibly can, and therefore you want to be making sure that you work with people who are going to give you true, honest answers. That's going to make sure that that's going to be an engagement that you want to get involved in. So that's ultimately what we think is the best way to approach it when attracting the right people.
No, I completely agree with that, and I'll tell you a quick funny as well. I had a conversation with somebody very recently, and as part of the opportunity that was presented to me, they offered me free chicken every day as well. So that's the first. Seriously considering that. I can't say anything more about that. Okay, guys, so one of the things I'm quite curious about, we talked about ways that we can attract people. Do we see a difference between a more mature enterprise and new startup businesses, between the way that they view flexible benefits and working patterns for their candidates?
That's a good question, though.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think it's hard to classify that into those two categories because it's dependent upon the business itself. Certainly, what we are seeing with the newer startups and that kind of younger mentality, if you will, is more flexibility around working environment, around culture, and certainly around working from home capabilities is something we don't see in more of the established firms. The benefits are about standard across the board. That's completely dependent upon the organization. But certainly the biggest kind of upswing in difference is the I guess your quality of life that goes along with your work life, if you will, is the flexibility to work from home, flexible hours. We've all been there in a metro area where you have to be in by 8:30, but that just happens to be when everybody has to be in the office and you're stuck in 2 hours of traffic, and then the same thing on the way home. So, when we talk about flexible hours, it's the ability to get in, beat the rush hour, come in just after and stay later. To work through a lunch hour and head out at 2 o'clock, work from home on a Friday, or, that type of thing. We see much more understanding and projection from your newer and younger companies, if you will.
Yeah, it's such a huge thing, staff retention, and it's something that we speak a lot about. I know when I was in Texas a few weeks ago at the SharePoint Tech Fest, a lot of people didn't realize that recruitment agencies talking about staff retention, perceived to just headhunt and pull people out. But a lot of times what we try and do is give this information back to the clients. If you're watching this and you're in a situation where you constantly feel like a lot of your best people are leaving, you've got to be able to address that and think, why is that? What is happening? Try and get feedback from people, because if somebody is leaving that organization, one of the first people that candidate is going to be explaining the reasons as to why they're going to be leaving. They're talking that to the recruiter. So we have very two-way conversations with our clients that we work with and we place people to. they also give us information as to why people are leaving. Right? And if we know that people have left there previously, we can also say to them, look, this is the feedback that this person is giving you. Right? Even after interviews, if somebody interviewed and didn't necessarily like that, we can give that feedback to that client, say they didn't like that, they didn't like this, they didn't enjoy that. So that hopefully next time they can fix it. It needs to be a two-way street. And you've got to be able to have that relationship, whether that's your internal recruitment team, your HR team, or those external recruiters that you work with. It's a massive piece of advice that we can give people. That Appendix 2 that we've got there, probably people watching, if you haven't got access to that, I'll pose the question to you, what would be the number one reason why people leave? I imagine a lot of people will probably say for more money. Actually, from our salary survey that we conduct, the top 5 things as to why people leave has nothing to do with money whatsoever. Absolutely nothing. For people that don't have access to it, number 1 is lack of career and promotional, needing new challenges, the work environment and the company culture, which you spoke about, Andy, as well, lack of leadership and vision, and lack of training. So it's definitely something to ponder, because we feel that there's all 5 of those things can easily be changed. It can actually be difficult to all of a sudden start paying every single one of your staff members another $10,000, $15,000 or pounds, overnight. It's going to be very, very difficult to do that. But these factors here can easily be changed. Yeah.
And what kind of advice would you give to employers if they're trying to embrace making that change?
It totally comes around just having the conversations. It's something that we experience firsthand internally with our teams that we run as well, is that 98% of the challenge is just sitting down and having the conversation and making sure people understand what that is. When we look at 57% coming back with lack of career promotional prospectus, is just a lot of the times when candidates come to us, they just don't get that conversation with their managers, is that it happens once a year. And it's right before bonuses are allocated, and it's sit down and say, how do we do this year? And that's it. But having the constant conversations with, this is where, this is how we're doing, or your quarterly, or bi-yearly reviews. People just want to know where they're going and what they can do to change. And certainly, around, the working environment and the culture, that's not going to shift overnight, but it's about making those incremental changes, on a weekly or monthly basis. And especially in this industry with the need new challenges side of things, is that individuals want to be heard within the departments and feel like they have a voice. And I've always found that that's something that's very easy to change. Yeah, it's just about it's about having those conversations with them one-on-one or as a group, just to make sure people feel that they're involved and feel the love a little bit, if you will.
Yeah, definitely. Again, this is information. This is not sitting here telling how people to run businesses or anything like that. But this is information that people talk to us about on a daily basis, that we make notes on religiously to feedback to our marketing teams and feedback to our clients. So it's just us regurgitating stuff. I mean, one thing that I thought of as well, if you think now about, if you're a SharePoint person or you're a business that's focused on SharePoint, and now there's a lot of businesses out there that are looking to move away from it. I had a conversation with a president of a very large-scale SharePoint partner this afternoon, and they're now saying they're looking at less focus on hiring specific SharePoint people. We're focusing more on either .NET specific or CSS or JavaScript or specifically cloud-based technologies. So if you look at the first 2 points there, lack of career progression and needing new challenges, if you were a business then going to be highlighting clients for Office 365 or for Azure, that can give a huge number of people internally in your business new opportunities, new career progressions. So that's a huge, 57%, 54%, 55% respectively there, that you could then try and fix and replicate. It's certainly food for thought, hopefully, and for clients to consider.
Yeah, I completely agree with that, guys. And the trend, something that I just picked up on there was that the trends are changing in terms of what clients require now. Less about those rigid type of job roles, such as the SharePoint administrator, the SharePoint developer. I think there's a bigger distinction coming. I mean, one of the trends I'm noticing quite a bit is there's less requirement for a C# specific SharePoint developer, so somebody who's working a kind of full trust code model, and more requirement. And maybe I'm speaking specifically about the UK market here, because that's obviously where I'm from.
I should speak for both the UK and the US as well, Andy, on that as well.
Is it? Yeah, so I'm seeing a lot of requirement now for less C sharp, more people that are in using the Java frameworks. And coining them as front-end developers. So I guess there's a lot more opportunity for people to break out from C# into different syntaxes, but there needs to be, in my opinion, a fundamental understanding of how we hook into those kind of cloud services, whether it's Azure, whether it's Office 365, and so on. And I guess that brings us into looking into the future. What are you guys seeing at the moment as the future trends? I mean, are you already thinking about this, observing a change?
I think if I quickly touch on the contract side of things, I think the contracts market is that it can react a little bit quickly, because those projects are needed almost immediately, right away, start Monday, something like that. So especially from the partner network, if they were a client that's doing a new implementation, they might not necessarily yet have those skill sets internally to be able to deliver on that. That's why they would need a contractor that's hopefully been doing that in their own time. So what I'm particularly finding is, yes, anything to do with SharePoint Online, anything to do with hybrid, anything to do with SharePoint app model. I would say they're three big things that people are going to be are looking to that are being requested within that market, and that could be anything from still the same traditional job title, so admin, developer, architect, etc. But it's with those technologies. If you can have it with those specific technologies, that's where you're putting yourself ahead of the competition. I can put an advert out for a migration from 2010 on premises to SharePoint Online. I would get a lot of responses because people want to get that skill set. There's only a small handful that actually does have it, and that's becoming a very common request now. And one thing that we're looking to try to speak to clients about is that what's coming first, the chicken or the egg? What do you need? Do you need someone who has got that skill set, but there aren't enough projects out there for people to gain experience in that yet? Or do you need someone that has an understanding of that can come on board and learn on the job and learn in their own time? I think that's where Paden will be able to talk a little bit more on the permanent side, where that's a huge focus that we're trying to speak to clients about.
Yeah, and I think when you look at in comparison to the contract side coming in for that very specific project, on the perm side, it becomes a bit difficult, because we're behind the curve from the recruitment standpoint. Is that we were talking about this on Tuesday as well, is that Microsoft has to develop the product, they have to roll the product out, partners need to adopt it, take it under their umbrella, and then go sell it. Then our end users and our customers need to implement it, roll it out, and it's I would say 20 to 25% of those customers are doing implementations on a large enough scale where it makes sense to hire a permanent individual to help go through that implementation with the partner as well. And that internal hires could be a combination of both contract and perm, but we would really only see maybe 1 or 2 hires for an implementation until we see that uptick in hiring post-implementation support, and then further customization implementation. So for us, particularly in the Azure spaces, we're just now starting to see those end users start to hire for the roles, because they've had the product for a few years now. They're starting to learn how to consume it and how to get the most out of it, and now they need help to take it to the next level. So from certainly from the permanent side, is it takes a little bit longer for that market to catch up, and as we expected, we're starting to get into that sweet spot for Azure, where we're starting to see a lot of demand for it. We saw it on the Dynamics CRM side 5 years ago. We saw it on the Dynamics AX side 6 years ago, and certainly with new releases comes that new demand. Yeah. And certainly on the CRM and ERP sides, as cloud is becoming centralized into nearly everything within a business, we're starting to see that demand. But it becomes difficult, as Alec was saying on the contract side, is that there's only so many people that understand how to do an enterprise implementation of Azure or Office 365. Yeah. So your options are limited. So what we see a lot of is bringing somebody in and finding out, well, where do you want to focus? Is it on the application development side? Because we can, somebody can come in that's a very strong app dev person that has touched Azure in a few different projects, but it hasn't been at the enterprise level. And then it's up to the company and that individual to start to learn and develop and fine tune that skill set, whether that's through certifications, user groups, conferences, developer days, things like that. So there's, it's a contribution from everybody, from us, from the user group communities, from the individual, and from the company to further educate ourselves on what these products are, because it has to come from somewhere. Microsoft can only do so much. It comes down to us in the communities to help push that and keep driving that as well.
Yeah, I must admit, I really respect the fact that you guys do show up regularly to the events, and not just attendees, but also to present free information like you're providing us today. And I think that's really important. The quality I look for, because I've engaged with Nigel Frank before, from an employer's perspective, is that you do understand the marketplace and you do understand the candidates. And I guess the other thing that's really important is when you are out there in the community, it's very easy to validate people by just speaking to maybe 2 or 3 key people. It's a very small community, isn't it?
Yeah, it really is. It's so small, and especially in the UK, my time over there was so great, but everybody knew everybody, and it was so small that reputations can be exposed very, very easily and very simply. And that's why we've always had a big philosophy and a big ethos of, if you specialize in something, if you are specialized in something, it's in that person's interest to do as well as they particularly can. If you do work with agencies, or if you have a very strong internal team, they want to make sure that they're specializing in that organization. Or if they're a local recruiter, they specialize in that particular region. Or if they're like what we are, and they're a specialist agency for particular technologies, they should be able to do that. And so if you are a client out there that has a relationship with something like that, make sure that it is a two-way street. Make sure they're not just yes people. Make sure they're not just going to say yes, and then not deliver. They should be able to give back and forth. I hope that ultimately helps everything.
Yeah, I think it certainly does. And just out of interest, guys, if I was an employer looking to find quality candidates, and I've really been intrigued by the message that you guys and Nigel Frank have put across to me today, how would I get in contact with you?
So either probably best way is through our website, so www.nigelfrank.com. We have a candidate search tool on there. So if anybody is interested in hiring specific people, you can actually search skill sets, locations. We have brief profiles of all the candidates on our system. You have a quick read on there, see if that would suit your business, and then we can get in touch with you from there. Yeah.
Well, that's fantastic. Unfortunately, we've run out of time here, but thank you so much to Alec and Paden in New York. I personally find it hugely interesting. There is a salary survey document like the guys have been making reference to. Gentlemen, if you'd like to quickly educate people how they can get hold of that document if they haven't already got it.
So we have a snapshot of the PDF, which is attached to the documents for this particular conversation. But we are going to be looking to all the attendees to send a full PDF document out to people. If not, go on the company website, register an interest, and we can get information out to you from there. So www.nigelfrank.com.
Thank you very much, guys, and I'm sure we'll be seeing you at one of the community events soon. Meanwhile, back here in Redmond, just a couple of announcements I have to make. The first thing is, if you stick around for the prizes, I believe we have over 500 people in the mix at the moment. Half of them might be my name, but there's a good chance you'll get something out of there. Mark Cashman is going to be joining us in 15 minutes. We're going to be talking about the mobile intelligent intranet. This is all off the back of the massive announcements made last week with the Future SharePoint event. So for now, thank you very much to the recruitment expert friends, Nigel Frank and Alec and Paden, for representing them today, and we'll see you guys soon.
Thank you, Andy. All the best, guys.
Bye.